Bernie Madoff was the cause of $64 billion down the drain. 4 died, including that of his own son, and thousands left without a roof over their heads. He preyed on the elderly, the poor, and the rich, and even sought out new victims in the place they felt safest, right inside the church. In Bernard Madoff's pursuit to remorselessly con billions of dollars out of innocent people, he even drained his own family and closest friends dry. Let us introduce you to the most successful Ponzi scheme of all time, the deception of historical proportions. Here we have the life and lies of Bernie Madoff.
He is asking for the judge to be a little bit more lenient when
the FBI arrested him this morning after he told senior employees yesterday that his business was a giant Ponzi scheme.
Well, I think here at year 5, we can say it has been extremely slow.
That the mastermind behind the largest Ponzi scheme.
His victims out of billions of dollars. His 150-year sentence virtually ensures he will spend the rest of his life in jail.
Bernie Madoff proved himself to be a fabulous liar from an early age, but he learned from the best after all. His parents knew their way around dodging the law. Both of them had unregistered business practices shut down, and his father dabbled in stock trading himself. After college, he started working at his new father-in-law's accounting firm, but it wasn't long before he decided that the accounting business was way too boring for his taste. So he set off to start his own trading company. And Bernie fit right in with the other unsavory characters on Wall Street. You see, Bernie was Jewish, and he used that sense of familiarity to prey on the unsuspecting retirees in his own community. His reputation as a good and honest stockbroker spread, and Bernie was soon swimming in clients. But what they didn't know was that Bernie was taking their money. The stocks they thought they were buying didn't actually exist at all. As long as he had a consistent stream of new investors, he used their money to pay old clients. A house of cards that was kept standing as long as Bernie had new clients coming in. Most of his deals were sealed by word of mouth at the synagogue or on the golf course, leaving no paper trail, just an ever-growing bank account. And so, the little sham firm grew and grew and grew. Bernie wasn't just persuasive enough to talk to hardworking people out of their savings. He was sufficiently slimy enough to weasel his way into the company of the rich and powerful. At one point, Bernie Madoff was responsible for 9% of all stock sales in New York City alone. The sheer amount of money he now had behind him was enough to get everyone to take notice of him. Several upper heads did later admit that they knew Bernie couldn't possibly be selling the stocks he claimed to be selling. So why would dozens of Wall Street higher-ups be completely aware that a company was making ridiculous amounts of money from thin air and not say a word? Because people in glass houses don't throw stones. That's why. The stock market is full of slime balls even bigger than Madoff. That has been true of the industry since its conception. The regulatory systems that are in place are barely keeping a hold on the loophole-ridden field. And back then, they were understaffed and easily bribed. Madoff took full advantage of this fact. Besides, by now, Madoff had some very rich and powerful people in his pockets. Private bankers, stockbrokers to the stars, heads of the synagogue, and a fair amount of high-profile lawyers. All of them were funneling their own money to Madoff too. They didn't care where it was coming from, just that money was flowing. Madoff even talked himself into a chairman's seat on the NASDAQ Stock Exchange, the stock exchange of New York City. Bernie played the role of a successful stockbroker and family man. When his sons, Mark and Andrew, stepped into their father's firm, they were just as clueless as the rest of Bernie's employees that they were working for a monster who stole from the oldest and most vulnerable members of our society. Madoff counted big names like Kevin Bacon, Fred Wilpon, the former owner of the New York Mets, the founder of DreamWorks Pictures, Jeremy Katzenberg, and Steven Spielberg were counted among his biggest clients. No one on the market was more powerful than Bernie Madoff. Everyone was clamoring to get the emperor of investments to take their money. But Madoff's end was approaching. It took years of investigation by one lone wolf to finally bring it down, and that man was Harry Markopolos. Harry was a financial analyst working for an investment firm that competed directly against Madoff in 2000. He was tasked with analyzing Bernie Madoff's dealings. It took Markopolos only 5 minutes of scanning through documentation to know something wasn't right. And in 4 short hours, Harry had enough evidence in front of him to contact the SEC with his findings. The SEC didn't even bother to reply to Markopolos. Dead silence. But Markopolos was insistent. In the years since filing his first complaint, Mark was going through every scrap of information he could get his hands on. Madoff wasn't just getting away with a few million in a yacht. Oh no, this hole went deep. Billions and billions of dollars deep. He sent another report at the end of 2021. 3 more reports was sent in 2005, 1 more in 2007, and a final report was sent in 2008.
How many times did you send material to the SEC?
May 2000, October 2001, October, November, and December 2005, then again June 2007, and finally April 2008.
By now, the SEC could have proven, without a doubt, Madoff's immensely huge scam with just a single phone call. But 7 complaints later, they still hadn't lifted a finger. In the 8 years that they had Markopolos' steadily mounting pile of evidence at their disposal, they could have saved countless innocent, hardworking men and women from losing their entire life savings. 2008 came with a bang. That's when the stock market saw a crash of epic proportions.
Talk about the speed with which we are watching this market deteriorate. We're red everywhere, essentially, down by 4-5%.
We're down over 16%.
Dow at the same time has fallen about 18%. The stock market is now down 21%.
In the sudden, uncertain economic times, old investors pulled out and new investors weren't coming in. No one was willing to gamble a penny on the market now, and that meant that Bernie no longer had fresh investments to pay off higher-up clients. In just a few months, he owed thousands of people a total of $7 billion. Old Madoff clients were running to the SEC in droves to file their own complaints. Markopolos was no longer a single individual that could be ignored. The SEC now had thousands of people breathing down their necks. At long last, the SEC had to act. They picked up Markopolos' 7th and final report and opened an official investigation. After 8 years of handing over one smoking gun after another to the SEC, Markopolos was vindicated when Madoff was arrested in December 2008. Almost all of the evidence was taken directly from Harry Markopolos' files. Madoff, facing irrefutable mountains of evidence, had no choice but to plead guilty to 11 felonies. Finally, after almost 30 years, Madoff was slammed with 150 years in prison for his crimes. Thousands upon thousands of victims came out during the trial. Retirees who had lost all of their life savings, businesses that shut down, and even charitable organizations were declaring bankruptcy. But the big names, the ones that Bernie kept well-fueled with smaller investors' money, came out richer than ever before. It wasn't millionaires losing their yachts, it was the elderly losing their homes, and the mom-and-pop stores closing their doors. The big guns weren't technically guilty of anything. According to them, they're just as much victims of Madoff's fraud as everyone else. And no one can prove that they definitively knew of any of Madoff's nefarious dealings. $36 billion is where the official number stands, but others believe that Bernie Madoff scammed the world out of closer to $50 billion. It really does seem like Bernie Madoff's sons, wife, and extended family were unaware of their hero's horrendous crimes. After all, Mark and Andrew immediately turned their own father in once they became aware of what he had been up to.
He marched into his father's office and said, "What the is going on here?" And Bernie said that his business was just one big lie and that he was billions in debt.
But that didn't stop the victims from suing Bernie's sons for negligence to the tune of $198 million. In the years following the arrest, Madoff racked up even more victims, even from behind bars. Mark Madoff committed suicide 2 years after his father's arrest, and Andrew died of cancer in 2014. Madoff's sister, Sandra Weiner, and her husband died in a suspected murder-suicide. They too lost billions to their brother's scheme. René Thierry Magon de la Villeche took his own life after losing $1.4 billion. And finally, Charles Murphy, another big client of Madoff, also died of suicide. He reportedly lost $50 million. Bernie Madoff preyed on the elderly and on the Jewish community he hailed from. He fed on the sweat and tears of those with less power. And when he died in prison from kidney failure at the age of 82, no one mourned him. But no one celebrated either. Madoff's death did not bring back billions of life savings. It did not return foreclosed homes or put food back on the table. He left as much of a bitter taste behind in his life as he did after his death. Make no mistake, there are many more billionaire beasts out there just waiting for us to fall into their traps. Bernie just happened to get caught with his hand in the cookie jar. But the truth is, we're all being picked clean by powerful players. They won't be losing any sleep when you can't feed your family. But how high do you think Madoff's numbers really ran before he was apprehended? And how many more predators like him are out there, prowling in the shadows, just waiting for the opportunity to drain you of everything you've got? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to tune in next time when we take on another big name with huge schemes and even bigger scandals. And if you don't feel like waiting for the next one, why not check out some of the suggestions on your screen right now? And as always, don't forget to leave a like and share the true stories of the sharks that infest our waters every day.